Hello and welcome to Freedom from Fear, a German New Medicine podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Newberry.
And I'm your other host, Abigail Puccioni. Please be aware that nothing discussed here on this podcast should be taken as medical advice.
Consult your trusted professionals and your own inner knowing before making any health decisions.
Hey guys, so before we dive into the episode, we just wanted to share some really exciting news about an event that we're going to be a part of this January 25th through 26th in Austin, Texas, and it's called Paradigm Shift, a GNM Weekend, and this is truly going to be all about building GNM community and socializing with like-minded individuals who are all on this paradigm shift journey, and we're going to feature a lineup of expert speakers on a wide variety of different GNM topics. Ashley and I are both going to be speaking at this event. And the main focus is going to be on how to actually integrate this beautiful body of knowledge into your life. We would really love to see you guys there, and we have the website linked up in the podcast description. It's paradigmshiftweekend.com. So definitely check that out for all the details, including the full speaker lineup and information on how to register. So yeah, we hope to see you guys in Austin this January.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Freedom from Fear. So today, Abigail and I are going to be discussing the gray area of GNM and basically this concept that there is not just one right way to learn or apply GNM, and just getting more into the nuances and discussing more of what that means and how we are using the lens of German New Medicine for this podcast, for our coaching, for working with clients, and how we live our lives and how that lens or paradigm influences us from day to day and how it can be supportive for you listening to really understand what's happening with your body and to give yourself compassion and grace as you're learning this stuff, and to have fun doing it. So, Abigail, take it away.
Yeah, so you mentioned the gray area of GNM, and I feel like another way that we could also say this is maybe the dark side of the GNM world that we've certainly noticed, and I know a lot of our listeners have noticed that there are people out there in the GNM world, in the GNM community, that are not always so kind or welcoming, and they make people feel very excluded, and they send the message that there is one right way, and they're the ones that know it. And if you're not getting your information from them, then you're, how can you say that you're even studying GNM, blah, 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 right? So again, we want to emphasize what we're all about, what this podcast is about. And I think the most important thing to make clear right off the bat is that we are not the authority on GNM. There is no official certifying body. There is no official organization. Sadly, Dr. Hammer has passed away, and I feel like the world of GNM right now is a bit like the wild west, where you sadly have a lot of people out there claiming to be I don't want to say the second coming of Dr. Hammer, but basically like the chosen ones, or the appointed ones, and this is the person that is worthy of spreading this information, or this is the person or the teacher or the organization that has the correct information, right? And so we want to unpack several things in this episode, including our definition of truth, and is there even an absolute right and wrong, or black and white? Did Dr. Hammer have the answers on everything? Do we believe every single thing that he said, right? So we're going to get into all of this. But first, just to make it super clear, we are not saying that we are the experts on GNM. We have invested a lot of time and money and energy into studying this beautiful body of knowledge. And we are so grateful to the work that Dr. Hammer has done. And ultimately, our goal is to help teach people about the innate intelligence of their body and to spread the word about a new paradigm, right? A new way of thinking about health in the body. That is our heart. That is our main goal. And of course, we want to teach this in a way that really anyone can understand, that's easy to digest, that's simple, that's fun, that's lighthearted, because we truly believe that not only is that the best way to teach something, at least how we prefer to learn and also to teach, but I think that that is ultimately what will help facilitate a perception shift that might actually help someone have an aha moment and have a real perceptual shift that could resolve a conflict that they're dealing with, right? Even Helmut Pilhar said that the best way, who was, Dr. Hammer's appointed lecturer, who he also has now passed, but yeah, he said that the best way to resolve, or a conflict is resolved when it either can't happen again or you can laugh about it. So we know the power of humor and lightness and ease and stepping into this space of personal responsibility, right? This radical responsibility to give us access to our greatest level of personal freedom. This is what we're about. And what we're not about is being absolutely factually right about everything. I'm sure that we've made some mistakes. I'm sure we've said, oh, this is related to this kind of conflict. Who knows? Maybe we're wrong. There's actually a lot of disagreement in the GNM world of differences in different resources that you have to do your best to look at multiple resources, what we've learned from different teachers, and do our best to synthesize that information, figure out, okay, logically, what makes the most sense to us, what resonates the most with us, and how can we regurgitate this in a way that will hopefully be helpful to people and bring them peace. And this is our heart. This is what we're about. We are not, however, saying that we're not, what do I want to say, Dr. Hammer's disciples, right? We're not, we're not just preaching, that we're married to exactly what Dr. Hammer said. I think that you can
gasp.
admire someone and look up to them and view them as a really great teacher and be very thankful for the knowledge that they've brought to the world, and also continue to question it, continue to expand upon it, right? Even continue to do, like, I think more research needs to be done. And I know Ashley and I, we don't believe that just, leaving it right there at what Dr. Hammer said and that's it, and we believe it, and that's end of discussion, case closed. I think that there's a lot that that we don't know, or that we don't have, there are still some gaps, I think, that need to be filled in, at least with, how we've learned and what we've discovered thus far about GNM. But we are certainly not saying that we are the top experts in the GNM world who have the authority to teach the one right and true way. We're not saying that all of our information is, we're not even concerned really with, right and wrong. And so, yeah, maybe Ashley, you want to jump in and talk about our definition of truth and, yeah, some of our goals for this podcast, and, yeah, just expanding on everything Irish brought up.
Yeah. Great start to this discussion, Abigail. And Abigail and I have been having this discussion for a few days now before recording this podcast. So definitely the right timing to record some of this. And, I'll just reiterate that, yeah, everything that Abigail said is definitely in alignment with what we are trying to bring for our listeners. And our vision is to, again, bring this information in a way that's fun, that's digestible, and in a way that, okay, maybe someone hears what we're sharing, or one of our guests is sharing, and they have an aha moment, right? And they hear someone's story, or they hear it in a different way that they've never heard it before. And that is that light bulb moment of, oh, now I can see things differently. And there isn't, there isn't one right way, I don't think, to teach this information or to apply it. And our goal is not to gatekeep this information. In the older generations of the GNM world, especially some of the people that were taught directly by Dr. Hummer, there has been a lot of kind of territorial kind of conflicts around the information and around GNM itself, or around how a particular person is teaching it, or their programs, or that, well, Dr. Hammer said XYZ. And even though maybe some of these other teachers have good information, right? Or their programs are really great. Our goal is to share it in a way that resonates with us. And like Abigail said, maybe that is not like, the 1,000% down to the each tiny minuscule detail that Dr. Hammer would have said, that might not be, true. But the thing is, truth is based on our perception. Even men and women have different vision. How we see is different. So even a man and a woman looking at the same thing are seeing it differently. We are designed to be individual biological humans, and this viewpoint that there's only one right way, honestly, in my opinion, takes the humanness out of German New Medicine and understanding this knowledge, because we are individuals, and not every person is going to have success or feel supported and heard and seen with only one teacher, right? Even Dr. Hammer himself, he was one person. And yes, he did a lot of research. I almost swore there, but I didn't. He did over 40,000 case studies. That's a lot. I don't think I've ever met that many people in my entire life. That's a lot of people. And the thing is, he definitely paved the way for this map, this paradigm. And there's still so much for us to do. And like Abigail said, it's not the end all be all. Question us, question GNM. I mean, I say this in my sessions with clients, in my workshops. My goal in sharing this information is not for just people to just take me at my word, but to question me and see, okay, does this make sense? How can I apply it in my own life? How can I see my own patterns? How can I see, oh, when I get triggered, this is what happens? Because it's so individualistic, and studying one biological program, out of context with a person is just theory. No one has just one program running and it follows the beautiful pattern of the second biological law, the law of two phases. Oh, conflict, shock. Okay. And then you have this nice, pattern. That is theory. And we all have multiple conflicts, multiple constellations. I'm sure some in conflict active, some in healing. We are very complex beings. And so there's not just one way for a person to learn this or apply this, because we're different. And a person on average has to hear something, I think it's 12 times to make a decision or to purchase something. And so we have to hear things many times or interact with information in different ways to be able to change our minds. Because, and we're not going to get into this a ton, but the subconscious is very subjective, right? And it's hard to quantify. I mean, even the perceptual part of a conflict shock, right? Because we are individuals, and that is hard to study, because perception is subjective. It's not something, at least as far as we know, that can be quantifiably measured in a scientific way. But, it's hard to understand our own. I mean, I don't know about you, but like, it's hard for me to even understand my own psyche sometimes, let alone like to understand someone else's, whether it's a client or someone I'm working with. Like, we are complicated. And so, something I will let Abigail talk about, but, we have freedom of speech. And we are not the GNM police. And there is no GNM police.
Well,
And
I think
yeah,
a
go
few
ahead.
people would like to be volunteer GNM police.
Well, yes.
But that's not us.
No.
We're not trying to do that.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, especially right in the United States, we have freedom of speech. You're allowed to put out whatever information you want. And the thing is, if someone is listening to our podcast and they don't like how we're sharing the information or what we're sharing, you as a listener have the power to turn off the podcast, right? Or, maybe take a break, or maybe if you're noticing that it's triggering, look at why. Okay, why is this triggering me? Like, why is it hard for me to listen to this? And question that, right? And also, like, you have the ability to listen to something else. And if you don't like how something is being shared, that's okay. Like, our our vision for the podcast is not to people please and make this, this pretty little package for everyone to take. And because that, although it might look pretty and be nice, might not help you. So,
yeah.
Like, how you interpret what we're saying is on each person. Like, that's based on your own perception, your own personal history, how you view the world, your own conflicts, your own constellations. And if something that we're saying is triggering, look at that if you're willing, right? Because, I've worked with coaches in the past, some in common with Abigail, that have said probably the most triggering things of my life to me. And it was upsetting in that moment. But then I was like, oh, yeah, maybe I'm not a victim in this circumstance. Or, maybe I was at that time, but I don't need to stay there. I don't have to stay there. And that's what we want this podcast to be empowering for anyone who's listening, no matter where they are on their GNM journey, so that they can get unstuck and that you can get out of your patterns. And again, back to our podcast title, have some freedom from the fear that you've been stuck in, right? And that is, our ultimate goal with anything that we're sharing. And, if in the moment of hearing what we're saying or sharing, it's triggering, can you be okay with that, right? So yeah.
And I think too, it's important to communicate. We're not trying to be perfect. Perfection is not our goal. And also our goal is not to just perfectly regurgitate everything that Dr. Hummer said. We're actually wanting to continue his legacy of questioning everything. This is what led him to make the discoveries that he did. He refused to stop questioning why. And I really respect that and admire that about him. And I think that, of course, I can't speak on, what is actually the best way to honor his legacy. But in my personal opinion, what feels best for me is to continue this legacy that he started of questioning the norm, questioning what you've been told. And I think um, that would apply to even stuff that he said, right? Like, let's
Yep.
have conversations about it. This is the whole goal of the podcast. It's not to be, these perfect little GNM minions that are, saying exactly what Dr. Hammer said and going around being the GNM police to other people, because, there are other practitioners or GNM, educators out there that, or people that are talking about GNM publicly that say a lot of stuff that we probably don't agree with everything. We might not teach it in that way. We might think, oh, that's maybe not the most accurate based on all of the time and money and energy we've spent studying and the resources that we have available to us. Uh, but then again, who are we to say that we're right and they're wrong? I would never, ever comment on something that someone else said and said, oh, actually, you're wrong because I think I'm right, right? Like I'm just not going to put energy into doing that. And I'm not interested in that, nor is that my place or my job
Yeah.
to do that. So again, if anyone is telling you that they are the best, that they have the true knowledge or they have the one right way, or oh, this is the only true GNM course or program, or this is the real information, or I'm the only qualified person to, to coach from this perspective, or whatever you want to fill in the blank there. If someone's saying that everyone else is wrong and they're right, or only a select few are, right, I personally would run far away from that in that mentality. So, because that's illustrating a much deeper issue, because like Ashley and I are saying, what our main goal is how to actually get this information across to people so that they can apply it to their life, so that they can get out of fear and move more towards the innate intelligence of their bodies. And, if someone doesn't like the way that we're teaching GNM or disagrees or says that we don't know what we're talking about or whatever, um, you're free to start your own podcast. And honestly,
Please.
I wish people would. I think that we need more, let's say, more diversity, more discussion, more let's have conversations about this stuff. And I think someone else starting their own podcast, sharing their own take on GNM, I think that is so needed. I think that we need more voices and people coming from all sorts of different backgrounds, bringing this beautiful information to the world, even if it's in a imperfect way. We're showing up, we're wanting to get this information out to people. We're not trying to keep it gatekeep it and keep it hidden because we want to protect the purity of it or something. That's just not what feels most in alignment to us. And it's okay if people disagree with that. Because again, we call this, this is a German new medicine podcast. We use that word because that's what I think people are familiar with. But whether you call it Germanische Heilkunde, La Medicina Sagrada, there are multiple ways of calling this beautiful body of knowledge. But ultimately, what this is about for us is the 5 biological laws. And I think that the way that you actually interpret those and apply them can be so beautifully unique and diverse, based on the individual and what actually makes sense to you.
Yeah.
Take the power back into your own hands. Don't just believe that you need to be taught by a certain, specific expert and that they have the one true way. I would never, certainly never claim that about, myself. And I know there are people with way more years of experience than me too. And I think, that's something that each person has to decide for themselves. Where do they feel comfortable getting their information from? Is it just, oh, this is the one right way? And for me, that just doesn't feel good. But yeah, I'll be the first to admit, I'm sure there are other people that have way more experience than me, or that were, trained under Dr. Hammer. And I, have learned under several of those people. And I think that's beautiful and great. And I just am so passionate about expanding this world and opening up space for conversation and welcoming people in that are new to this. You don't need to meet certain requirements or take a certain person's course in order to have a seat at the table. And in order to be able to question things, you know, we welcome all sorts of people to listen to this podcast. And we have received feedback from listeners that they have actually been able to have aha moments while listening to our podcast, that they have actually had resolution of
Mm-hmm.
chronic symptoms. They've had different resolutions based on things that they've learned in this podcast. So we know that even if we're teaching this imperfectly and, you know, don't have the most experience out of anyone in the world, right? People are still getting benefit from the way that we're sharing this information, is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, and I think like our goals from the start of this podcast have been to teach the spirit of this information and to pass on the legacy of Dr. Hammer's just questioning everything,
Yeah.
with lightness and humor and fun, and promoting, or, you know, teaching this in an easy to understand way. So I think that a lot of times we might be skipping over the true complexity of something in order to get the spirit of it across, in order to communicate the essence of it. Even
Mm-hmm.
if we're not, and a lot of times we intentionally do not dive into the nitty gritty like perhaps some other GNM educators would, because we don't want to overwhelm people. We're
Yep.
trying to do this in a way that you can actually grasp without necessarily having a medical background, right? So that is also what we're passionate about.
Well, and like Abigail said, with the nitty gritty, as a listener or a person that is learning this information and trying to embody it and learn it, the nitty gritty details are important to an extent, right? And having those facts and those pieces of information correct, that is important. And as a beginner or a new listener to our podcast, or just to GNM in general, you don't necessarily need those details to resolve something. I'm going to say that again. Like, you do not have to have all the details in order to resolve something. Like the big picture is right. Like what Abigail just said, and is, if you can laugh about it, or if it can never happen again, like that means you've resolved it, right? From Helmut Gilhar. And so, you know, honestly, I mean, and this is like one of my life mottos, actually from my grandma. One of her life mottos was like, if I can make someone laugh every day, or she's like, my goal is to make at least one person laugh every day, even if it's myself. And the thing is that bringing that lightness and humor and just understanding the humanness, right, of our experience is what could make the difference for someone to be excited about this information versus being shunned or turned away, or feeling like, oh, well, I'm not an expert, I'm not good enough to learn this information, it's too complicated, it's, overwhelming, blah, blah, blah. And the thing is, also, that's why there are practitioners. That's why we do coaching, where we do know those very nitty gritty details to help someone through a program. But even in my one-on-one sessions, or even in my workshops, some of those details, again, not that they aren't important overall, but like in sharing the gist or the essence of helping someone resolve something, it's not always important.
Yeah, definitely. I think that that's a really important point too, is that even someone who knows nothing about German new medicine can still resolve their conflicts. We're resolving, I mean, look at
All
how
the
many
time.
people get the so-called flu every year, right? People are going naturally into resolution. So we're not trying to spread the message that, oh, we have the secret to helping you resolve your programs, right? And even we've also been very upfront and honest about this, that there are programs that are fatal to resolve.
Yep.
Certain adaptations, given enough time, if there's enough, if the conflict was intense enough or it continued for a long enough duration, then yes, resolving that, you might need medical intervention in order to survive. So again, we're not telling anyone what they should or shouldn't do. And certainly it would be extremely irresponsible of us to spread the message that, oh, you should just go start trying to resolve as many conflicts as you can, right? That's not necessarily always a smart idea, right? So we're not saying,
Not
oh,
the goal.
just keep trying to resolve all your stuff. And I know that Dr. Hammer was also very vocal about that, right? We need to be very intentional and understand that certain things that have been going on for a long time, especially when we're dealing with constellations, there is a reason, a biological reason that we have that constellation to protect us. And it's not always smart to just try to go start resolving stuff. And so again, we know that this is not this is something that should be taken seriously, right? And so we've been upfront about that, and we cannot give medical advice. We are not saying that we're true and what Dr. Hammer considered as a Hammer therapist. We're not giving anyone advice about, oh, is it safe to resolve something or not? We don't have a copy of your CT scan. There are only very few people in the world that are actually able to do that. And we're not claiming to be able to do that. However, I think that when someone learns this beautiful paradigm, this way of thinking about health in their bodies, that can help them downgrade, right? That can help out of fear, that can help make them, let's say, more resilient in their psyche so that they're less likely to experience a conflict shock or as severe of a conflict shock over something that previously, before knowing this knowledge, would have caused a very significant conflict shock. And I know I've given the example before of, say my husband and I are out at a restaurant and I think that we're drinking filtered water. So say, if I was still in the holistic paradigm, and I'm drinking the water that they brought me, assuming it was probably filtered. And then I look over and I see one of the waiters filling up a pitcher just from the tap. Right. And so knowing if I was still in the holistic paradigm where I had all these subconscious beliefs about how dangerous tap water was and how bad for me it was and how many, had the fluoride in it and all this bad stuff, all the toxins, right? I would have been so eligible to experience a pretty big conflict shock from having that realization, oh my gosh, I've been drinking tap water. Whereas my husband, who did not have all the holistic indoctrination that I did, would not have had a conflict shock from that. So really what we're trying to get across is, and this is Dr. Hummer's message too, learn this information while you're healthy. We're not giving advice about, what to do if you already have a more, say serious conflict load going on. But overall, learning this paradigm and moving you more towards peace is, in my opinion, can only help, right? I don't think that we're necessarily going to cause someone to go into this massive resolution. I don't think that we're saying that, we're that, I don't know. I mean, maybe that could
Well, and
happen
you have to be ready.
right, but you have to be ready. And also that's not our, responsibility at the same time. What perception shift might be caused by someone listening to our information?
Yeah. Your tap water example is funny because, yeah, that wouldn't bother me either. I mean, yeah, I have filtered water at my home, but yeah, that's interesting and makes a lot of sense. And also, if you're listening and you have those fears, right, or you're coming from the Western medicine or holistic background, and because we've all been indoctrinated with something, right? Every single person. And so the the goal of our podcast and what we're sharing is to help you question that. And it doesn't mean that now you're obligated to like shift your whole paradigm, or like what I did after only after like I think it was 6 months after starting to learn German medicine, I actually quit my nursing job. So because for me personally, once I learned about this, and I was already questioning the medical stuff but before that, but it was a powerful enough shift for me that I was like, I cannot work in this career anymore. It was just like I felt like in order to follow my integrity and my authenticity, like I couldn't do it anymore. But if you're listening and you are in the Western medical paradigm in some way, shape, or form, I'm not saying, oh, you have to quit in order to be like a true like GNM I don't know, groupie or something, but like you get to decide as an individual what you do with this information, to again question it, question us, question Dr. Hammer. And also, if you're willing and open to it, see how, if I put this on, like you're trying on some clothes, would that help me, right? Like, does this information bring me more to peace? Does it make sense? Can I see the pattern play out in my life and see how, I actually have more power and more freedom than I even realized, right? And that is, or can be, the power of learning this information is taking your health and your responsibility of taking care of yourself back and deciding what you want to do with it, right? And we're not saying that there is only one way to do that or several ways, but like it depends on the individual. And again, how you decide to use this information is up to you. And you could use it in a very different way than what we're choosing to do on this podcast or as a coach. And that's fine too. That there's so many different ways, as each individual person is so different from one another. And even Abigail and I, who do this podcast together, and I would say we're good friends. Even her and I have different ways of teaching, or maybe would slightly disagree on how we want to share certain information. And that's okay too. Honestly, also, like, coming from very different backgrounds and getting into German medicine is, in my opinion, what makes this podcast so diverse and so vast, because we have completely different experiences and we're still coming together to do this thing together, but we are very different people, and that's okay too. And just one more thing and then I'll let you talk. So even our guests, we might not agree with every single detail that they're sharing on the podcast, or maybe what they're promoting, or what they're doing outside of even the podcast recording, and that's okay too. Our goal is not to be just this repeating and regurgitating exactly what Dr. Hammer is saying in his words, right? Or at least the English version, because I don't speak German. But it's to share the rich complexity of someone's story, and how they were able to resolve things, and how it helped them and maybe changed their life for the better, and so it's okay to disagree on things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think going back to, if you haven't listened, give it a listen, episode 14 about GNM is not something you do to heal. There are so many different beautiful, let's say, modalities out there. GNM is not it's not something, oh, here, we write you a prescription, this is what you do, but
Right.
it's a framework, which is why I like the term for GNM, the Germanic Healing Framework. And I think that this viewing it this way is often a lot more helpful because different people have different skills and different tools and different modalities that some people find very supportive. Even from the lens of German New Medicine, they're using it to help support their bodies or using it as a way of facilitating a perception shift. And literally anything can technically be used to help facilitate a perception shift. It
Mm-hmm.
can something you heard on TV. It can be something that a certain therapist is saying to you, working with a certain coach or therapist. It can be a certain modality. It can be a certain, probably even a certain
Song.
substance, right? A certain song. Like you never know what can spark that perception shift and make you see the world in a different way to where the conflict that you're dealing with maybe no longer becomes relevant. And so
Mm.
I always like to leave a lot of room for possibility and exploration. And also, there are so many beautiful, diverse views out there. And I think that that's what we're, like Ashley was saying, we have different guests on the podcast, and we wouldn't necessarily, endorse all of them, right? I'm sure some of them we don't maybe necessarily agree with everything they're saying or how they're going about using GNM in practice or teaching or whatever. However, we're not the GNM police. We don't need to comment on that. That's not our job. That's not our role. Our job is to hear a, diverse range of stories and help people. I guess we're trying to get this across to people in a way that you might hear something that we say or that one of our guests say that just creates an aha moment that strikes a chord with you, that makes you feel seen and heard. And that's ultimately what it's about, at least for
Mm-hmm.
Ashley and I. Again, we're not saying that we're doing this the right way or that we're the authority on GNM or whatever. We've never ever claimed that. And we would encourage people to start sharing GNM in their own way, in a way that makes sense to them, because I guarantee you the people that Ashley and I will reach is probably very different than an audience that you as an individual might be able to reach, right? We all have our own gifts and talents and ways of communicating and our own personal histories. And I think that that is a beautiful thing. We all have our own unique constellations, right? That make us who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's a beautiful thing to celebrate and to be able to view our symptoms in this new paradigm and to view our constellations, our behavioral adaptations and our unique personalities through the lens of this paradigm is such a gift. And that is really what we're trying to communicate here. And also, we have episode 11 with Dr. Melissa Sell. And I know I was babbling on about this earlier, and I like maybe it didn't, I got a little off topic, but I meant to bring up this episode because something she was one of the mentors that I've learned from, and she always said never put limits on what the body is capable of, even from the perspective of the five biological laws, right? Where yeah, in some cases a certain conflict load, if you have a program that's been really intense and running for a long time, you can't necessarily just resolve that without some physical consequences, right? Like you might need
Mm-hmm.
medical intervention or it could be fatal. And we're, wanting to be very upfront about that. But also, never put limits on what the body is capable of doing, because I think we really have no clue the untapped potential of the subconscious, of our psyche, of our human, of our consciousness, right? I think that we actually, and I can't say for sure on this, I don't know, I don't have facts to back this up, but based on, for example, Dr. Bruce Lipton and some of the work he's done with the biology of belief, that's the
Yep.
title of his book, looking at the actual physiological impact of belief and how what you believe in actually does have a huge impact on your physiology, which I think goes perfectly in line with Dr. Hammer's discoveries. But, think about that. Why would I ever put limits on what the body can do? Why not be in that space of what if and
Mm-hmm.
thinking more positively? And I'm not saying just, oh yeah, I don't need to do anything, I'm fine, right? You might need some support, but also I think the power of our mindset is so underrated, certainly in
Mm-hmm.
society at large. And really, this is all about like what Ashley and I are trying to do is creating this collective shift, not giving personalized prescriptions. So we never want someone to take this information and think that we're speaking exactly to you and like, oh, well, then this podcast guest shared their story and this is what they did. So I need to do this exact thing, or, that sort of thing, right? This is not personalized health advice. We are not ever saying that we're doing anything like that. This is about sparking a collective shift in consciousness and expanding our understanding of the body, ultimately the brain, psyche, and organ connection, as outlined in the first biological law, and seeing how those three things work together.
Yeah. Beautiful. I don't know if I even have anything to add after that.
Well, we can talk
Um,
about our love of humor. To us, humor is sacred. That is how we really honor something that is really important to us. So for Dr. Hammer's information, his the paradigm of German new medicine, of his discoveries, for us, the best way that we can really honor him and his legacy is, one, to continue questioning and to continue that legacy, but also to use humor and lightness and have fun with this. That is how we show that we really respect something, because we
mhm.
know how important it is.
We're serious about our humor.
We are. We are indeed. And we want to have fun with this, right? We're doing this as a passion project. We are trying to have a good time. We're not trying to be like, we need to be really careful about every little thing we say because we might make so and so mad. And I mean, people are probably going to not like this episode at all. I'm probably, some people will not appreciate this, and that's okay, because we're not trying to make everyone happy. Um,
Mhm.
we're trying to stay in our integrity and what we feel most aligned with and how we can best spread this beautiful information.
Yeah, exactly. And um, something that Abigail and I talked about, but before we started the podcast, and something that's important to me, um, is to enjoy what I'm doing, right? And enjoying when I'm driving on the road and the traffic is really bad, right? Like enjoying my music, enjoying what I'm eating for breakfast, right? And in terms of the podcast, enjoying and having fun in how we are presenting it. Because for me, if something is not fun and enjoyable, I'm not going to do it, or I'm way less likely to do it, right? And so if you're listening and German new medicine feels heavy, or it feels like this burden, or you're using it as a way to judge yourself, like, maybe start questioning that. Because having this lighthearted approach with anything in life, whether it's health or something else, is so powerful. And this isn't like the goal of learning this is not to just, resolve all your conflicts in constellations and like, well, now everything's hunky-dory and I can just go on living my life. Like, no, that's not the point of this information. And life is going to keep happening. I mean, I just shared this on my Instagram yesterday. I was in a, call it a fender bender. Basically, my bumper got scratched, right? And what actually happened was so small compared to how I responded just from my past accident. But like this morning, I woke up and I was like, wow, I really got my panties in a bunch about getting a few scratches on my car. And, so using this information and understanding how we're responding to shocking things in the moment and bringing humor to things that maybe you wouldn't otherwise be able to laugh about without understanding this and how important it is, right? It makes life more fun and enjoyable, and you become a more resilient human because you're not taking everything so seriously. And that's what I love about teaching this is enjoying it and having fun and teaching it in a way that's not only fun for us, but also fun and enjoyable for our listeners. And yeah, I've never been a stuffy person, so that's easier for me, I guess. But yeah, we want to enjoy what we're doing. So
Yeah. So to wrap up, I think the main takeaway, I know we rambled on about all sorts of things, so hopefully you enjoyed this conversation. But yeah, if you take anything away from this, let it be this: we're not right. We're not claiming to be right. We're not claiming to be the top experts out there on GNM. We're not claiming to be spokespeople for GNM. There's no official certifying body for GNM. We're not claiming that. And we're really not concerned with the technicalities of right versus wrong, because our definition of truth is not just looking at the, like we said, the nitty gritty, like, oh, well, what are the minute details and facts, right? We're looking at what is the overarching truth. And by truth, at least my definition of truth and what we've talked about before on the podcast, what leads you closer to peace and away from fear? What resonates in your innermost being? What makes sense to you? What holds up to your own line of questioning? And that ultimately, for me, I know is what it's all about. So again, we're not right, and we'll just leave it at that. Feel free to say that we're wrong.
About being right. Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time.
Bye, guys. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation. We appreciate you being here.
If you would like some additional support in navigating your health symptoms, we both provide coaching services from a German New Medicine perspective.
Our Instagram handles and personal websites are linked in the podcast description.